At this point, I think it's my turn to say a few things, which I appreciate. And I'm going to share some slides with you if I can. I'd just like to begin by expressing my sincere appreciation to everyone who has joined us today for this worldwide celebration of St. Mary Magdalene. We've had people on the call from around the world. The dedications that you've offered have been absolutely beautiful, so diverse, such a beautiful community of people that have joined us today in this wonderful feast of St. Mary Magdalene. So I just want to offer a couple of things on a slightly different perspective, perhaps. Mary Magdalene has always been my favorite saint, and she was independent, she was courageous, she was fiercely loyal, she was determined, she was resilient, and she was unstoppable. And I will offer a small tribute from New York City, which is where I'm speaking to you from today. This is a statue of Mary Magdalene by John Collier. It is at the Catholic 9/11 Memorial down in the Wall Street area at St. Peter's Church. And it's not at all surprising that Mary Magdalene was chosen as one of the saints for this memorial, because she's someone who had the fortitude to stay through the crucifixion and witness that, which was horrendous, and the resilience to return to the tomb 3 days later. And that strength of character and courage, I think, is so appropriate as a tribute for 9/11, and just in terms of Mary Magdalene herself. So because I've always been very fond of her as my favorite saint, when I began reading about the discovery of ancient Magdala, Mary Magdalene's hometown, only 11 years ago, I was absolutely intrigued. And even more intriguing to me was what they found when they discovered Magdala in 2009. Just for a little bit of context, on the Sea of Galilee, and some of you may have been there, Magdala is right here, and just up is Capernaum, where obviously Jesus had his headquarters, and it's about a 2-hour walk from Capernaum to Magdala. So it would have been quite easy for Jesus to have come to Magdala, and undoubtedly he did. Another town I'll highlight is Tiberias, which is where Herod Antipas had his court. It's very close to Magdala, and as you read the Gospels, you'll often see a reference of Mary Magdalene being in the company of a woman named Joanna, the wife of Herod's steward Chusa. Herod's steward would have been, in an American term, the chief operating officer or chief financial officer of Herod Inc. He was essentially the person that ran Herod's household and businesses. And so as his wife, Joanna would probably have lived in Tiberias, which is where he would have been located. And as you can see, these two towns are not very far apart. The discovery of Magdala happened in 2009. It was almost accidental, in the sense that a Catholic priest named Father Juan Solano wanted to build a retreat center on the Sea of Galilee. He chose Magdala for a couple of reasons. Number one, his mother was very devoted to St. Mary Magdalene. I think she was also her favorite saint. But also there was a resort in that area that had gone bankrupt, and they were able to pick up the land there at a pretty reasonable price. And so in Israel, if you're going to build something in an area of historical significance, you have to let the Israeli Antiquities Authority come in and do a salvage dig to make sure you're not going to build over something of historical importance. And of course, in Israel, almost the whole country is like that, but certainly around the Sea of Galilee. So the IAA archaeologists came in. They dug for about 3 weeks. They actually dug mostly at the water. They didn't find that much. They went a bit further north, and they hit this. And this is a first century synagogue that was uncovered in Magdala. As you can see, it's very ornate. One of the first things that strikes you if you go there and see it is the mosaic work, the tiles that they had. This was a very well-appointed synagogue, they've estimated that only about 200 people could have attended services in the synagogue at any one time, which is interesting because the town had a much larger population of several thousand people, most of whom would have been Jewish. And so it's interesting why they had this small, beautiful synagogue, but it was certainly extremely luxuriously decorated. What you see in the middle here, this thing that looks almost like a toy chest, is called the Magdala stone. And this has been called the most important discovery in biblical archaeology since the finding of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I won't take up all of our time today talking about this particular artifact. You can read about it, and there's other presentations about it. But what archaeologists have determined that this probably is a 3D representation of what was found inside the Holy of Holies in the temple in Jerusalem. And so it's they've never found anything quite like this before. Another thing they found in an antechamber of the synagogue that's fascinating are these coins. These were coins that were minted in Tiberias in 29 AD, which gives pretty good evidence that this synagogue was in operation at the time of Jesus' ministry. And of course, he was only 2 hours away. In the gospel, it talks about Jesus, going through their synagogues and teaching there. So in all likelihood, Jesus did in fact teach in the synagogue, which makes it an absolutely spectacular find. And this was only 11 years ago that it was unearthed. As you can also see, these are some other things that have been found so far in the archaeology. This is some sort of implement that was used in the worship services. As you can see, it's very finely decorated, very ornate. This is a part of a fresco. You can even see sort of the scarlet paint and the canary yellow paint that's still on it. These were frescoes that would have adorned the walls of the synagogue. This is some more of that beautiful, intricate mosaic work that's found there. So this is a very, very wealthy community and very sophisticated, which is very interesting. And probably my favorite thing at Magdala is actually this. There were 4 of these found. These are Jewish ritual baths. I'm probably gonna not pronounce this properly, but I think the pronunciation is Miqva'ots. And under Orthodox Jews, and as we know, Mary Magdalene was an Orthodox Jewish woman, they were required by the Jewish law to have these ritual baths for purification at certain times. Certainly for women of childbearing age, it was monthly. And I'm sure that if you were a woman who had been released from 7 demons, you would no doubt have purified yourself with a ritual bath after that. But in either event, these are 4 Jewish ritual baths that date to the 1st century in Magdala, and it's actually pretty likely that Mary Magdalene may have bathed right there, which is why I think it's one of my favorite things. These particular Miqva'ots had a very sophisticated water engineering system. In fact, they haven't found this again until the Middle Ages in Europe. So again, it's evidence that this was a very wealthy community at Magdala, where she lived, and it gives us some context of what her life was like there. Was she one of the town's elite? Was she actually someone poor? We don't know that. We'll probably never know that from the archaeology, but what we do know is that the town itself was very wealthy. Now, what was that about? Well, in a word, fish. The fleets that were the fishing boats on the Sea of Galilee, it wasn't just 1 or 2 boats. There's some estimates that there were up to 200 fishing vessels that were out fishing the Sea of Galilee. This was a very sophisticated international food business that was created from fish based out of Magdala. So they weren't just selling fresh fish, but dried, salted, pickled fish. There was a fish paste, and there was a very popular fish sauce at the time called garum. And at least 4 ancient authors of the time talk about the fish of Terichi, which is Magdala's name in Greek, that it was sold in the markets of Rome. This was a sort of a cachet gourmet product, almost like Norwegian smoked salmon today. And it involved international trade. The archaeologists have found over 4,000 ancient coins and 300 fishing weights in the marketplace at Magdala. They found evidence of mobile glass manufacturing. So they were able, obviously, to create packaging, whether those were jars or other containers, for this fish, for it to be then transported and exported overseas. There was a holding pool found on the shores of the Sea of Galilee at Magdala that was over 40 feet in diameter. That was for the fishing boats to unload their catches from the Sea of Galilee. And they had a marketplace in Magdala where they found 28 shops so far. So for its time, that was a very big marketplace. And there was a lot of international trade. So it gives you some sense of the town that Mary Magdalene lived in. Just to see it on a larger map of Israel, I mean, here's Magdala up here on the Sea of Galilee. Here's Jerusalem down here. For those of you who've been there, you probably know, and of course you have to go around, but it takes about 2.5 to 3 hours to make the trip by car today from Jerusalem to Magdala. And so it would have been at least a week probably on foot or by donkey at that time to make that trip to Jerusalem that Jesus and Mary Magdalene made just before the crucifixion. I'm also highlighting here Caesarea. This is a port city. It was a beautiful Roman city. And the ruins there, the archaeology there is fascinating. And it's right on the Mediterranean. And this is really how the fish was shipped. It would take about 2 days or 3 days to, with donkeys or what have you, to transport the pickled or salted or dried fish from Magdala to Caesarea, the major port. And from there, it was shipped across the Mediterranean Sea to Rome and many other cities. So that was essentially the trading that was done with Magdala and the basis of their economy. Let's just switch gears and talk about Jerusalem as well, because when I was in Jerusalem, just having come there from Magdala earlier this year, walking the Via Dolorosa, what came to my mind in doing that was Mary Magdalene. Similar to Denise's inspiration earlier today, as I walked past each of these stations of the cross on the Via Dolorosa, what came into my mind was, where was Mary Magdalene standing at each of these stations? What was going through her mind? What was she thinking as all these dreadful events were unfolding before her? And these particular stations here, this is the door here where legend has it that Veronica wiped the face of Jesus. This is station 7, where Jesus falls just before he is almost leaving the city for Golgotha. This is station 5, where Jesus falls and where Simon of Cyrene is asked to carry the cross for Jesus. And in all of these stations, as I walked it, I tried to imagine where Mary Magdalene had been, but more particularly what she was thinking, what she was feeling. And when I did that, all of a sudden the Stations of the Cross became for me a very different experience than they've been in the past. It almost came to life like a movie, and it was filled with grief and despair and raw, painful emotion. But it was also punctuated by acts of compassion and nobility and grace. And in so many ways, this was such a rich and beautiful experience. It was very profound, and I was inspired to turn this into a book. And that was Mary Magdalene's Stations of the Cross. That book came out about a week before Easter of this year. And right away, Amazon put it into global distribution. And so it's now available in 80 countries, I think. And it was during that process that I learned that there were more than 50 parishes worldwide named for St. Mary Magdalene. Many of them were of very different denominations: Roman Catholic, Episcopal, Anglican, Ecumenical Catholic, Greek Orthodox. There may even be others. And in the same way I was inspired to write the book, I became inspired with another idea. And that was to bring together St. Mary Magdalene parishes from around the world to celebrate her feast day on July 22nd. Now, this was in the midst of COVID-19. And so there were so many difficulties with parishes. They were closed. People were fighting, the virus. They had people who were sick in their parishes. But there was one upside of the COVID, and that was that so many people had learned to use Zoom all over the world. And suddenly we could use Zoom as a vehicle to bring together St. Mary Magdalene parishes from around the world in an easy and a cost-effective way. And here we are sharing our love and our devotion to St. Mary Magdalene on her feast day. So I would just, in conclusion, like to thank all of you, everyone who took a chance, replied to my email, and signed up to join us in this worldwide celebration of the Feast of St. Mary Magdalene. Thank you all for all the work that you did, the beautiful dedications that you offered, from videos to beautiful hymns to poems to PowerPoints, everything you did to make this such a beautiful celebration. The directories have been distributed to allow all the participating parishes to keep in touch if you wish. I'm sure that you will. And both video conferences are being recorded. So we will set them up on YouTube shortly. We'll send you a link. We'll determine if we're going to try to combine them. I think they're going to be too long. I think we'll probably keep them separate. I don't know. But we will let you know when that's ready, and hopefully it won't take too long. And I just want to thank you all so very much.